morning, everybody, and happy Tea Tuesday. Yep, it's Tea Tuesday today. Just use lower hashtag Tea Tuesday in lowercase. And I like to thank Life with Patty and Kathy's Favorite Things for hosting us. You can have hot tea, you can have cold tea, you can have informal tea, and you can have informal or formal tea, whatever you like. And while you're having tea, you can do a craft, you can chat, you can do most anything you want. So let's get started. And my drink today is leftover tea. Love me some of that sweet tea. Well, this is a half and half sweet tea, half regular. Half sweet and half unregular, excuse me. Oh, first thing in the morning, I'm all confused. Let's get back to hello, Mr. Twiddle. Oh, Mr. Twiddle, he's quite a guy, isn't he? We're on chapter 4. And it's Mr. Twiddle and the Snowman. One day, the children who lived next door to Mr. Twiddle made a fine snowman in his garden. Mrs. Twiddle said they might because her garden was so much bigger than theirs. So the children were very pleased, and they built a big man, quite as tall as their daddy and very fat and round. We should have used the word fluffy. Mrs. Twiddle, can we have an old hat for his head and an old scarf for his neck? Called the children. Looking at the kitchen window, Mrs. Twiddle was making cakes. Yes, said Mrs. Twiddle, you'll find an old hat in the hall and a ragged old scarf somewhere by it. And if you look in the hall drawer, you'll find an old pair of gloves. 2 for the snowman, cold hands. Oh, good, shouted the children, and they tore off to get the clothes. They found them, and they found Mr. Twiddle's stick, too, which they borrowed for their funny old snowman. My word, he did look grand when he was finished and dressed up. You should have seen him with Mr. Twiddle's old hat on his head, a scarf tied loosely around his fat neck, raggedy gloves on his round hands, and a stick through his arms. Really, he looked very fine indeed, and the children were proud of him. Mrs. Twiddle looked out the window and laughed. He just wants a pipe to stick in his mouth, she said. Then he'll be happy. Here is one of Mr. Twiddle's. So the children stuck a pipe in the snowman's mouth and then danced around him. Laughing, their mother called them in for tea next door, and they hurried off, hungry and happy, wondering what Mr. Twiddle would say when he saw their wonderful snowman. When Mr. Twiddle didn't come home till it was almost dark, he had been to see his brother in the next village. He stumped in at the front gate, tired and hungry. Then he suddenly saw an old snowman standing quiet still in the front garden. Hello, said Mr. Twiddle in surprise. Who's that? What are you doing here, my good man? The good man didn't answer. Mr. Twiddle grew cross. You needn't think I didn't see you standing there trying to hide from me in the darkness, he said. You are up to no good. I'll be bound. What are you waiting for? The snowman said nothing at all. Mr. Twiddle marched right up to him and looked at him as closely as he could in the half-darkness, and he saw the snowman had got his hat on. You've got my hat, he said in a rage. My dear comfortable hat. How dare you take my hat? Give it to me at once. The snowman didn't give it to Mr. Twiddle. He just stood quiet still and stared him out of his big stone eyes. And you've got my scarf on. I do declare, roared Mr. Twiddle. Yes, you have. What next? I'd like to know. I suppose you've been sneaking around my house. Just taking whatever you can put your hands on. I'll fetch a policeman." The snowman stared and said nothing. "Can't you answer me?" shouted Mr. Twiddle. "Haven't you got a tongue in your head?" The poor old snowman hadn't got a tongue of any sort, so he couldn't say a word. He just stood there, and Mr. Twiddle's hat, scarf, looking very large and miserable. Excuse me, the air conditioner just turned on. "And if you hadn't got my gloves and my stick," cried Mr. Twiddle, suddenly seeing them in darkness and feeling them, "this is too much. My hat, my scarf, and now my gloves and my stick. You are a wicked robber, and if you don't give me back my things at once this very minute, I'll go out and get a policeman now." The snowman didn't move. Then a bit of snow melted by his mouth and the pipe fell out. Mr. Twiddle picked it up. "And you've got my pipe too," he shouted. "My very nice oldest pipe. What next? Are you wearing my vest, my socks, my best shirt under that large white overcoat of yours? Oh, you look bad. Wicked robber." Just then the village policeman came by and heard shouting. He walked into the front garden. "Now then, what's going on?" he asked. "Oh, policeman, I'm glad you've come," said Mr. Twiddle. "This robber won't give me back my clothes that he had stolen. He must be deaf and dumb. He won't even say a word to me." Mr. Twiddle suddenly slipped on the snow and fell against the snowman. He clutched at him, and one snowman's stone button fell off and hit Mr. Twiddle sharply on the nose. That might have hurt. "Oh, you wicked fella, you hit me," shouted Mr. Twiddle in a rage. "Take that, and that, and that." He slapped the snowman hard, and the snow fell off in big pieces. Mr. Twiddle was astonished. He hit the snowman again, and the funny old snowman began to fall to bits. Mr. Twiddle fell on top of him, floundering about in the snow, shouting, smacking. The policeman pulled up just as Mrs. Twiddle came to the door in astonishment to see what the matter was. "Twiddle, what are you doing?" she called. "Are you being rude to the policeman?" "Excuse me." "No, ma'am, he didn't." "He isn't, excuse me," said the policeman with a grin. "He's fighting a big snowman and breaking him to bits." "Really, Mr. Twiddle?" said Mrs. Twiddle in surprise. Must you do a thing like that? And look at the mess you're in." "Good gracious me. And you spoiled your new hat and your brother's, and you broke your nice new stick. Well, you'll have to use your old one again. The snowman has got them, so you can bring them in with you before he melts all over them." Poor Mr. Twiddle. He couldn't think of a word to say, not a word. He went into the kitchen, excuse me, all covered with snow, and Mrs. Twiddle shooed him out again. "I'm not going to let you cover my nice kitchen floor with melting snow," she cried. "Shake yourself in the yard, please, and chop up your broken stick." "It will do for firewood." Mr. Twiddle went to the woodshed very gloomily. He took the chopper, and oh dear me, he chopped up his hat, and then he went to hang his broken stick on the peg. There really is no knowing what he'll do next. There you go. We'll be starting chapter 5 next week. Thank you for coming along for Tea Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed Mr. Twiddle. You never know what's going to be on my videos. Look in the description box. Find out what's going on for hashtag Tea Tuesday. Go visit the other ladies. God bless. Bye now.